So the two things I think we can do collectively, simultaneously.
Professor Dylan Rodriguez, activist, author, and a fearless community leader. This is RCNV Conversations.
As we approach the 2024 election, what key actions should individuals and communities prioritize to ensure their efforts against hate are sustainable and impactful?
Two things I think we can do collectively, simultaneously, is to rethink hate and to rethink power. The tendency is for the political, cultural, and emotional work around hate to once again collapse into the realm of individual or individualized conflict, right? The danger of this is that by fixating on something like hate, we are encouraged to reduce forms of violence, of premature death, and of suffering, and of profound vulnerability, right? Targeted, uneven, asymmetrical vulnerability, meaning like there's specific people and bodies and communities and geographies that are targeted by violence. And it's not reducible to hate, right? These are systems and structures of violence. We are encouraged to reduce our analysis of those forms of violence and suffering and vulnerability to the realm of relatively individualized feelings.
Yeah.
Being hate. Okay, so there's that. We got to rethink that. We got to rethink the terms we use. And maybe some of the unintended consequences of the terms we use. Like, I know that sometimes people will say hate as a catchphrase when what they're really talking about is systemic anti-Black violence, or they're talking about police power, or they're talking about, colonial racist occupation violence, right? So that's what they mean. But if they use the word hate, there's a tendency to translate that into the realm of individualized interactions and feelings. So we got to rethink hate, because you can have casualties to a systemic violence that is actually divested of the hate. And I will say this, I would argue that the soulless, unfeeling, dead-eyed bureaucrat is at least as dangerous as the on-fire, right-wing, hateful acting reactionary, right? And I'm talking about in terms of the roles that they play in creating casualties among the peoples who are targeted in these uneven, asymmetrical ways by these systemic structures. Right? Anti-Blackness, transphobia, Islamophobia, anti-migrant hatred. I mean, we're seeing it right now, right? We're seeing it right. Like this thing about that Trump marched out, right? And that JD Vance are marching out around Haitian migrants in Ohio, et cetera, right? Like that's just, again, the theatrical tip of the iceberg. What we're talking about is a system that is created a systemic animus, right? So it's not even hate, it's just a systemic violence that is targeting that particular community of people, of displaced and migrant people, so that they then become vulnerable to that theater. So there's all this stuff that precedes the hate.
So, right? We're seeing it play out as an act of propaganda.
Yeah, yeah. And the problem that a lot of folks that identify with the side of social justice, et cetera, have is that our response is to what we perceive to be the hatefulness. I'm saying that is not an adequate response. So if we're talking about systemic violence, we're not talking merely about hate. In fact, hate becomes a relatively minor part of that equation. If you're talking about systemic violence in a deep way, you are now holding your collective selves responsible for developing strategies that will address far more than the individualized animus of individual people, right? Now you're actually having to deal with the activities that are done on a mundane, everyday basis by those dead-eyed, soulless people who have no feelings of hate, right? All they feel is a commitment to the bureaucratic apparatus, right? And that's what we're talking about, like,
or a commitment to country.
Yes, right. Absolutely.
Country. Yeah.
Yep. And they do it out of what they would say is love.
For country.
Right? Yeah. They would say they do it out of patriotic love. That's the performative theatrical part of it. The fact of the matter is what we're trying to deal with strategically and analytically are the casualties. And what we're trying to get to are the things that extract those casualties. If we're doing that, then we're talking about violence. We're not just talking about hate or patriotism for that matter.